So, oh, hello, Jane. Nice to see you here. Jane from Cornwall. There are a couple of Janes. Okay. Oh, yeah, I can see the messages popping up where you're from. I once went to a Chinese restaurant in Brussels with Situ Rinpoche and a couple of other Rinpoches. And the Chinese waiter, probably the boss, I think, not the waiter, came over because they were in robes. And so very politely, he said, I forget the Lama who replied to him. I forget his name. He was very witty. But the manager said, hello, where are you from? And this Rinpoche turned around and looked at him as though he was mad. And he said, my mother. Yes. And the guy was quite taken aback. Anyway, so here we go. So today we're going to start this talk on wisdom and skillful means. And normally we start with prayers, good motivation. Of course, that's what we must do. It's very appropriate. But in order to introduce the introduction properly, I'd like to say a few words about this talk itself. If you saw the page devoted to it, then there was a close-up of Buddhavajradhara. And as you know, perhaps Buddhavajradhara has a bell and dorje held to the heart. Buddhavajradhara is the main Buddha for our Kagyu tradition. So the very essence of what is held to the heart are the bell, which represents wisdom, voidness wisdom, and the Vajra, which represents skillful means. So this talk is very sort of relevant to our Kagyu tradition. What you'll understand by the end, I'm sure, is that wisdom and skillful means covers about everything in the Buddha's teaching. So 1 hour and a bit is a bit ambitious. What I'll give you today is an overview so that you'll understand, I hope, what these things cover. Now, I've sent you 2 documents. One of them is quite big, is about 30 pages or so, extracted from the study course, relevant to today, but the actual sections altogether relevant to today make about how much? 500 pages, I'd say. So it's a lot. And now that I've started doing these Zoom talks, there are different topics, but they fit together. It's like science, mathematics is mathematics, but you need to be able to do math to do biology. And biology involves chemistry, and sort of the ideal scientist would know all the different disciplines so that they have a view of the material world, which is very, very comprehensive. So Dharma's endless. It's just really, there's so much of it. And we shouldn't let that daunt us. What we need to get, what I hope to give over the coming year, are a series of structures so that you have it pretty much sorted in terms of general categories. And this one, wisdom and skillful means, being a very important one. Then afterwards, the other material you can find in study courses, you can find online, you can find in all the wonderful teachings being given by different teachers online just now. You can fill in the gaps. I always think of it like drawers. If you have a chest of drawers or one of these marvelous Chinese medicine cabinets with many, many drawers, then once you know what the main drawers are, then you can pull out that drawer and then you've got the details inside, and often drawers inside drawers. So people who study in the Shedra for 6-9 years, they go into more and more details, but they do all fit into overriding structures. So today, the title is the need to balance. skillful means and wisdom, the need. So who needs this? Well, certainly, if you're a cook in a restaurant and you're leading an ordinary life, you don't need this. So the need is actually the need if you're on the Bodhisattva path, if you're on the Mahayana path to enlightenment. Even though we could technically, academically, make a case for the need to balance wisdom and skillful means in the Theravada path, in the Shravaka paths, it's stretching it a bit. When we use these terms, we are talking about people, I think like most of us, who are really longing from the depths of their heart to reach enlightenment so they can be of true use to everybody else and help them to reach enlightenment. So we talk about a path to enlightenment, and all of that sounds out there. I saw the other day the longest road in the world where you could actually walk without taking an airplane or a ship goes from South Africa to the farthest end of Siberia. And it gave an estimation of somebody walking how long it would take. But you could do all of that just on bridges and road. So when we hear about the path to enlightenment, and when our great teachers like Taisitupa tell us, of course, we're all Buddha right now. However, the journey to enlightenment is rather long, to the Buddha's total enlightenment, where you will be like a Buddha. You will be, but it might take a wee while. So we can imagine it as sort of a journey, it seems, out there with a far off destination. But anyway, if we're going to follow that journey, we need skillful means and we need wisdom. And today we'll see what they mean for the Bodhisattva. But the real journey is not out there. It's you and your mind, me and my mind. It says very clearly in the Prajnaparamita teachings that once the Six Paramita, which is very much what today is about, are complete, you're a Buddha whether you like it or not. So when we look at the Six Paramita, it means generosity. You are totally given to everyone. And that's the most joyous, beautiful thing, to be free from ego. And you are impeccably ethical. Everything you do is pure. That's wonderful. And you have total forbearance. Nothing upsets you anymore. Nothing. Even all the hardships of being a karmapa, being a taisitupa, dealing with people, situations, sangha, monasteries, all of that. Nothing. That's your mind is totally forbearing. Your mind is pure in all it does. And then your diligence, you find joy in Dharma. And that joy is endless, it's deep, it's unshakable. It doesn't depend on outer things. It depends on the beauty and strength rising from your own heart. And then your meditation. But what is meditation? It just means your mind is no longer a wild beast. Your mind is calm. Your mind is displaying all of its beautiful, innate qualities of peace and love and wisdom. And then you are wise. Your mind is crystal clear. So it's not a journey out there. It's a journey to being complete, being pure, being whole. Now, in that journey, as we'll see in a minute, the very basis is a bodhicitta. So let's start today by turning our love, our hearts, in loving care to all our fellow beings with a big mind that includes everyone, but in particular our own parents and our siblings and our children, those who karmically are the beings very present in our life, whether they help us or whether they harm us, doesn't matter. They're part of our karma, and it's vital that we include them in our loving care and our loving wishes to become like the Buddha. So a big mind endlessly embracing all beings, a loving mind which loves them all. We try to love each of them as much as we've ever loved anyone. And that's where human life is beautiful. We get opportunities to love somebody. And, the somebody might be a budrigar, it might be a cat or a dog, it doesn't matter. At least we can learn what love feels like, to be aware of another being, to care for them. So we try and love everyone as much as we've ever loved anyone. And then we are very happy because we have Dharma, and that is timeless. Everything else comes and goes, is impermanent. Dharma is forever, your very, very best friend. And that makes us so happy.
Sanje chodang soje chonam la jancho bado dani chapsunche dagi jinso jipe sonam ji rola penchara sonje drupara sho semchen tamche dewa dang dewe judang dempara jorche dungal dang dungal ji judang tralwara jorche dungal me pen dewa dampa dang men tralwara jorche Nyeren chagdan ne tang tralwe tanyom chempola ne para jorche Palen sawe lama rimhoche dage chewara pende denshola gadren chempo gone jezonte kuson tuche ngadrop saldo sol.
Thank you. So, wisdom, skillful means, the need to balance them. And as I mentioned, we are already looking at the Mahayana way of Buddhism, whereby we want to become Buddhas. Now, it's not for this course, it's not for today, but when we analyze the main schools of Buddhism, then the way we do it is to understand their view, how they see life and how they see the Buddha's teaching, how they interpret it, the Theravadas and all of them. Theravada, Zen, Tibetan, their view. And then based on that view, their conduct, their ethics, what they consider the best conduct. For instance, in the Theravada tradition, to take vows, to renounce, to go to a monastery, very, very high. Conduct, view, conduct. And then, based on that view still, meditation. What do you do in the intimacy with your own mind in order to best follow the Buddha's intention? And so the main meditations of Zen, of Theravada, Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, they're not the same. And then out of view and conduct and meditation comes a result from conducting oneself that way, meditating in that way, and from living life with that view of things and what is the Buddha's message. So there's a result. Now within Mahayana, we have Vajrayana, all the teachings of Tantra and those without the visualizations, without the mantras of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and so on. The view of Vajrayana, the conduct of Vajrayana, the meditation at its base, what we are doing with our mind, is no different from Mahayana. Vajrayana does not have a different view. It does not have a different ethic than the Bodhisattva ethic. The meditation, which is to purify what bodhisattvas purify, and to cultivate what bodhisattvas cultivate, and to understand the Buddha nature of mind, just the same as bodhisattvas. It's just the methods are quite particular, they're very powerful. So the need to balance skillful means and wisdom is the key overriding structure of the path. If you're a bodhisattva on the journey to become a Buddha, however many lifetimes, however many cosmic eons that might take, you need to balance skillful means and wisdom, and mainly we'll be looking at that today. But also, if you're on the Vajrayana path, you're the hopeful, we can say, or optimistic ones, where you're going to get enlightened in one lifetime, or 3 or 7, or at the worst 16 maybe. Still, you need to balance skillful means and wisdom, which primarily mean the same thing as in the bodhisattva path, but they take on a special aspect. In the last Zoom I did, which was actually a meditation retreat where we learned the Chinrezig practice, in the very beginning, when we take refuge, bodhicitta, then in that practice we say, simply by doing this practice, a mantra recitation, may I fulfill all 6 paramitas. Everything is subsumed into one yidam practice, like Chinrezig, so it becomes a bit special. So in the documentation I produced, and my printout is in black and white because I've got problems with the printer. So, but I did send you a copy of this. And if you haven't got it or haven't got it printed, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You'll see in the top half of the page, it says skillful means Mahayana. And underneath I put a pyramid to show how one thing is based on another. So at the top, when it says the practice of the first 5 paramitas, that is actually what this code word skillful means. It's a shorthand for the first 5 paramitas. Now we have another shorthand for the first 5 paramita in practice, which is compassion. Very often when we hear the word compassion, we think of a sentiment. We think of an attitude. We think of a state of empathy with other beings, sympathy. That's emotional compassion. That's mental compassion. But in this journey to enlightenment, you could sit on your butt in a state of this loving compassion for all beings, and you're not going to get enlightened. You need compassion in action. You need to live compassion, and you need to live compassion in relation to other sentient beings. Otherwise, you're never going to learn to be a Buddha. It will be like training to be a doctor. You do all your medical theory, and then you never have one patient consulting you. How are you going to develop skill in knowing what's wrong? How are you ever going to develop experience in seeing what happens, in knowing how patients are different, and so on and so on? So if we want to become Buddha who can help everybody, you can't just do it in your mind. Normally, there are exceptions, but you know what they say, exceptions prove the rule. So for 99% at least of Mahayana Buddhists, of Bodhisattvas, compassion means compassion in action, because that is where we train in compassion. Any of you who've helped somebody else, you'll know this, and this will become vital in a minute. It should have come at the end of the talk, but it's come out now. So what can we do? In order to have the wisdom that's being referred to here, you could spend 30 years in a Buddhist study college, and you could learn everything that could possibly be learned, and you could become, like some people who are especially gifted, Asperger's people. I'm sure that they could digest all the Buddha's teachings and be able to reproduce them. In fact, I know one who's very good at this, because I'm supposed to be a Buddhist teacher. I do know more than most people a lot of things by heart, but this guy can just rattle off any of the lists and all of the structures. You could learn all of that. Does that mean you're wise? No. It means you're knowledgeable. Knowledgeable and wise are very, very different. A wise human being is something else. So the word compassion, karuna, means compassionate mind and compassionate activity. And the compassionate activity is described by the Buddha through the first 5 paramita. And even the name paramita means far shore. We're not, sometimes it's translated as the other shore. That's not quite right. You're not on a shore needing to cross the water to get to another shore. You're in the drink. We're in the water right now. We're in what is called the ocean of suffering. And we're swimming hard to stay afloat. And when things go well in our Dharma life, we're swimming in the direction of that far-off island, which is safety, which has fresh water, which has lovely coconuts and pineapples, where we can eat and be okay. And then when the teacher and the real Dharma teachings come along, that's like a boat. The boat comes and picks you up. You're still in the same place. The island is still far away. The distance of water between you and where you're going, enlightenment, is still as long. But the fact of being in a boat, rather than being in the water, staying afloat, is so different. And that we can experience when your faith is good, when you have enough understanding and conviction of Dharma. You'll feel what it's like to be within the boat of refuge, within the boat of the Bodhisattva's loving mind, that lets go of ego, that lets go of pride and needs always to make territory, and so on and so on. So we still have a long way to go. So now, to come back to the point, what will actually get us to that far island when we're in the boat, like rowing the oars, is the actual practice of the first 5 paramita. So we call that compassion, or we call it skillful means. And in nearly all of Dharma, Mahayana Dharma, we can substitute those words for each other. Compassion, skillful means. There is no skillful means which isn't about developing compassion. They're 2 totally interchangeable words when we study. So what I've done with the pyramid is to show that in the first 5 paramita, which we'll touch on briefly in a few seconds, then we have the main meaning of skillful means. But like a pyramid, you cannot have the summit without the layer that's underneath. And that layer underneath cannot hold without the layer that's underneath that, all the way down to a solid basis in the earth, rooted on the earth, set on the good solid earth. So now we go to this first pyramid, and we will work from the bottom upwards, because what happens in these teachings is that sometimes things are very implicit. When I did my own, studying with Khenpo Soltim Gyatso, it was very intense. Then he will be teaching the first 5 paramita as skillful means and as compassion. But what was implicit was all the things that come underneath Now, the problem these days, at least what I see as a problem in some places, is that those implicit things are not emphasized often enough. It depends on the teacher you go to. And it's not a criticism of teachers. It's just the way it's been for centuries. And so that the basic things are ignored a bit. And people don't have enough of these basic things. So what are they? What are they? You see at the very bottom, awareness. Now here, by this, and there's a course coming up on this in March or April. Mindfulness, Buddhist mindfulness, not like secular mindfulness. So they're very different. So mindfulness as the fusion of awareness, mindfulness, and what we call care, three things. That's the foundation of the whole Buddhist path. Becoming aware of what it means to be embodied. It's not just about mindful walking, being aware of the sensations in your foot. It's about realizing what the Buddha is telling us about being in a human incarnation. Being sensitive to that. In general, all that it implies, the limits it puts on us, but the opportunities it gives to us. The limits of only seeing through these eyes, hearing through these ears, and having a body that can get unwell and that interacts with other people's bodies, and there's desire and there's aggression and all those things. So mindfulness means your mind is full of the Buddha's teaching. It's very easy. In secular mindfulness, the whole emphasis is on about being non-judgmental. In Buddhist mindfulness, we draw a tremendous distinction between having good judgment and being judgmental. If you have good judgment, you won't be judgmental, right? But good judgment, I laugh to myself tremendously sometimes on mindfulness courses in Saniling. People come from a session, very often if you're being naughty and listening to conversations as people walk by or talk with each other, then you hear all this thing about judgmental and just letting stuff be, just being aware in the moment. So there they are in the lunch queue, and there's about 12 pots of food, and you see their eyes as they come where you can see the pots, looking at each pot and already deciding, I hope there's some of that left by the time I get there. Or, no, I don't want any of that. It gives me gas, and so on. They are using this wonderful thing we have, which is clear judgment, the ability to evaluate. When you drive a car, when you do almost anything, all the time, we are using our ability to discern, to compare, to evaluate, and this judgment is very, very important. You have a precious human existence. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? The judgment, what I did in this last hour, what I did yesterday, what I'll do tomorrow. Was I wasting my life or using my life? We don't just say, I'll just be present in the moment. Well, I wasted. That's awareness. That's awareness. As my friend Mathieu Ricard, he says, a sniper can be very aware and in the moment as they kill somebody. You can feel just as the finger goes on the trigger as you take aim so clearly and distinguish, and then feel it, hear it, being present. And then if you're without judgment, you just killed somebody, but you don't want to be judgmental. No, you were in the moment. That's what counted. So anyway, I'm being a bit super critical here, but I want to tell you very clearly, and our course will be about that. Good judgment is about what is the foundation of our path. Being judgmental means you're prejudiced. It means you're egotistic. It means that you are buying into your historical prejudices and assumptions about people. That's not good. So when we have good judgment, we can see, I've always done that. That wasn't good. There is a huge difference. So anyway, the mindful awareness of our body being incarnated, of our reactivity, it's called mindfulness of feelings, what we like, don't like, mindfulness of our mind, whereby through meditation we come to see more and more clearly what goes on and the stories behind the story and the agendas we didn't even know we had until we started excavating, and so on and so on. Mindfulness of mind, and then mindfulness of what's called Dharma, the interconnectedness of everything. That is that growing awareness that we humans can have, that sensitivity, is the implicit foundation. And out of that, if all goes well, you'll realize you're not alone. And there are budgerigas and dogs and cats and other human beings who feel just like you, who are looking for happiness just like you. And so once, and we of course, we've all experienced this. If you've loved somebody, a friend, your children, your parents, we know that person becomes so real for you. And you don't mind giving up a bit of yourself, losing out yourself to help them out. That's kind of love, your sensitivity to another being's existence and wanting to do all you can to make that existence healthy and happy, and that they've got friends and safety and good health and resources and all that kind of thing. That's love. That will only come from awareness. If you're not aware of the world around you and other people, how on earth can you develop love? It's so obvious. So anyway, love, which is a whole topic for a retreat. It's a topic for years of training, and we have special meditations to cultivate loving kindness in our heart. But then out of loving kindness, which is the implicit foundation, comes compassion as a state of mind, as an attitude towards the other, because we realize that we long for the other that we're aware of to be well. And we realize that this suffering that they carry in their karma that is happening to them through their lives, the people they're meeting, the circumstances of poverty or environment, where they live, and so everything, their karma is spoiling their happiness, or their own mental attitude, their inner karma of mind. They have, in one way, everything they could ever long for to feel happy and to feel they're doing pretty well. But they don't, because of all sorts of reasons. So we realize that even if you've got 9 reasons to be happy and 1 reason to suffer, there is this mind's tendency to home in on the 1 reason to suffer. It's normal for human beings to do that. And so we realize we can never help others to be well until we really deal in the short and long terms with the causes of their suffering. However we do that. So this caring for others to be free from their suffering, realizing the power of suffering that comes through people's minds, through their karma, is the real basis for compassion as an attitude. And then based on that love that becomes compassion, then the next step is relative bodhicitta. I put it here as bodhicitta aspiration. And you think, well, what can I do about it? Of course, and it's wonderful, we can feed the hungry. We can give clothes to the poor, and so on. We can cheer up people, help them, give them some psychological help. And then we can help, maybe 1, maybe 2. And some people can help hundreds with their circumstances. But the long and the short of it, and of course there are acres of bodhisattva teachings on this, is if you just look, who in human history has helped humanity the most? Because if we want to help others, we need a role model. We need to imitate the best. So who helped the most? And those who helped the most are those who gave others the means to help themselves. And where does the best and the deepest and the most lasting help come from? It comes from the Dharma, of course. If we can become like Buddha, and on the way, more and more like Buddha, like our great teachers that we can meet in this world, like the Dalai Lama, like Taisittupa, like Karmapa, and so on, who show us the example. Already their lives, really and truly, are helping thousands, tens of thousands of people, these great teachers. And they're helping them in the best way by giving people the resources, the means to help themselves. So the more we think of it, the more we realize the best way we can help others and ourselves in the process is to become enlightened, as I mentioned earlier, just simply to become more generous, in other words, less me, 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 and more pure and ethical and so on, the paramitas. So this longing, which reformulates our entire life to become Buddha, so we can really and truly help others. This is aspiration bodhicitta. It's the bodhicitta wish. And we cultivate that. There's one wonderful advice, which is the bodhisattva aspiration and some of the prayers that go with it. We do that 6 times a day in the 6 moods of the day so that we don't forget. So that's the aspiration. But then, okay, there you are, longing your socks off. I'm going to become Buddha so I can really and truly help everyone. I'm a Karmapa in the making. And, when Buddha or even 3rd level Bodhisattva Ken gets going, boy, is he going to help many people. You can be there longing for it. But how will you acquire the skill to help others? That's in action. Whether it's material action, where we do try and help the lonely who are in the world around us, we do help those who need friendship, where we try and help materially with whatever resources we have, we can. It's only in the interaction, normally, that we learn what these first paramita mean. So bodhicitta, practice bodhicitta. The 5 is the 6 paramita, the 6 things which, when they're together, will take us to that far shore of total freedom and purity and wisdom and all of those perfect qualities of a Buddha. So the 6 paramita is wisdom, and the first 5 are skillful means. And they form a synergy. When we study them, sometimes we say there are 36, because for generosity to be best generosity, it needs right conduct, it needs the ethics. For generosity to be perfect, then it needs forbearance, so that you can put up with all the difficulties. It needs diligence. And then for generosity to be perfect, your mind needs to be stable. It needs meditation. And then it needs wisdom, so it's wise generosity. So we've got generosity as generosity, generosity as ethical generosity, generosity as forbearing generosity, generosity as diligent generosity, generosity as meditative generosity, and generosity as wise generosity. 6. The same 6 for each of the 6 gives us 36 aspects of the paramita. They really help each other to grow. It's a synergy. It's a wonderful interactiveness. And if you are well guided in your own Buddhist path by good teachers, then they wouldn't try and balance these things, but sometimes you really need to concentrate on the one or the other, and they will help you. Your wisdom may be getting on pretty well, but you're not that generous, or your ethics is a bit dubious still, even if you don't see it. So then sometimes we get guidance to help us. So skillful means the first 5 paramita. And then wisdom. Let's look at that in general now, before having a few moments to dig into the details. You can see that the wisdom we want in Mahayana, the word for wisdom is prajna. And in the documents you've got, you can see the prajna or prajna. Well, it's well defined. And there are 3 levels of prajna, and I've grayed out 2 of them on your diagram. Because in the Mahayana path, really when we talk about the 6th paramita, we're talking about the highest transcendent prajna. Prajna means best knowing, best knowing. So we get 3 levels. The first is worldly best knowing. Now, best means 2 things. You've not got it wrong. It's not twisted knowing, where you kind of know, but actually your knowledge is a bit distorted one way or another. It's like as we learn the Buddha's teaching, obviously as beginners, we don't quite get the message clearly. And as the pennies drop as we go through the path, we realize how rough and ready our beginner's understanding was. We didn't quite get it right. We'd interpreted it through our own habitual mind patterns, meanings of words, and so on. So best means not confused, but also means nothing missing. So sometimes we're just ignorant. We don't know until we discover something. So our knowledge has many, many things missing. So prajna means best knowledge. It's fairly complete and it's not distorted. And there's worldly knowledge. And really, I suppose our science, if we include the mind sciences like psychology, psychiatry, and all the kind of brain research and that kind of thing that goes on today, is not too bad at, let's say. There's a lot of knowledge, and people can be very wise on the basis of that. Like a good gardener can be very wise and knowledgeable. But why is it called worldly knowledge? It's at best, and that's pushing it a bit, it's knowledge of karma as well as the material world and how it works. When it's worldly, the knowledge doesn't yet know about liberation. It doesn't know about liberation from suffering. All suffering comes through the delusion of ego. So when it's worldly knowledge, it is knowledge which is primarily used for self. That's how it is. It's what we mean when we say worldly, is that even if you are very wise, basically your knowledge is keeping you in rebirth after rebirth after rebirth, and it won't get you out. It will make, at the very best, decent rebirths where you've got the right facilities to follow a strong Buddhist path. Can do. So then when we go next, that worldly wisdom becomes a basis for an understanding. I mean, this is not intellectual, not something you could write an essay about. Inside you and me, in our hearts, that feel for the suffering that is samsara, the valley of tears, and its never-endingness, and the fact that each time you're reborn, in some ways you start all over again. It's cruel. You know, you get to my age, I'm so happy with what I've acquired in terms of Dharma, in terms of understanding of life, in terms of meditation, being able to be at peace with myself. And there I am, I'm going to have to take a new body and grow up with new parents and go back to school or whatever happens. How long will it take me to get back to where I am now with all the right circumstances so I can pick up where I left off at the very best? If I'm not going to have 10 other lives in the meantime, just dealing with karma and without the precious opportunity. So this suffering that's innate to reincarnate existence, the sensitivity to it and a longing to be free, for the mind to be at peace and pure, and so on and so on. Then that becomes transcendent. It means to get out. So this second one that's grayed out is how to attain freedom from the process of reincarnation. Freedom forever. And that works for one sentient being, you. It's already fantastic. That's one less problem in the world. And because you are plumbed into your own consciousness, it's wonderful. You get free. Nothing wrong with that. But then the one that's not grayed out, the highest transcendent praja is called, it's got lots of adjectives in front of it, is how to attain the Buddha's enlightenment, not just freedom from reincarnation, not just a state of absorption in mental peace, but the Buddha's wisdom and love and compassion and all the qualities and the ability to help endless other beings find their own freedom. That is the wisdom we want, the prajnaparamita. And so the earlier course, the very first of these courses, Voidness for Dummies, was a very brief glimpse of what do we mean by prajnaparamita? What do we mean by wisdom as voidness? Knowing the interdependent, dreamlike, but powerful nature of those worldly existences and reincarnation. Understanding it, feeling the fiber of it, the substance of it, the power of each channel of karma at work inside people. That kind of wisdom, so that on the bodhisattva path, we can relate to the people we're helping in a full or a growing sensitivity and wisdom to what they carry from their long past, and to know what's possible for them just now and not possible in their journey towards the future. That kind of wisdom will only come about through a very stable and liberated mind, the mind of prajnaparamita. You can call it Mahamudra, you can call it Dzogchen, as well, it doesn't matter. Third Karmapa tells us very clearly, these three can be totally substituted for each other. Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, that's Dzogchen in Sanskrit, and middle way. They're not different. So that's the wisdom that we need to attain. Now, about the first 5 paramita, and this is now the key point, we can have another substitute word. So we call them skillful means. We call them compassion. We can call them goodness as well. And I think this is very, very useful, Because without developing this fundamental and more pervading goodness of being, you will never become wise. That wisdom only emerges through the first 5 paramita. Goodness. And then without wisdom, you're never really going to become good. You might think you're pretty good, and other people might think you look pretty good. But the goodness won't be liberating goodness. Paramita takes you to the far shore of enlightenment goodness without the wisdom, which means you're not attached to it. You're not stuck in it. Wisdom frees you from ego and frees you from projections, wrong projections onto other people and onto life. Now, when we look at the first 5 paramita, and you'll see that in one of the documents I sent, it says they're in order. They go from the most obvious to the most subtle. They go from the easiest to practice to the hardest to practice. And in a way, we can see these first 5 paramita, that is compassion, that is goodness in practice, as all being developments of generosity. The word generosity, dana, in Sanskrit, actually the root meaning of dan, which gives us don, donation, in our modern languages, doesn't mean to give. It means to sweep away. So what is it it sounds funny, isn't it? With giving is very kind of positive, like give something. And here we're getting rid of something. So what we're getting rid of is ego delusion. We're not getting rid of ourselves. When we say ego, it doesn't mean you're Buddha. That's your true nature. It really is. We are all so good, so pure. It's who we truly are. So we're getting rid of the delusions, the deluded stories of me. That's the heart meaning of generosity. So giving stuff just helps us to do that, because part of me is very possessive, it's very territorial. So we need to break down that old habit by giving, especially giving what we are clinging to, whatever it may be, not just things, ideas. We need to learn to be able to let go, to become open. And Milarepa, in his shortest summary of the 6 paramitas, says, other than no more me, there is no other generosity. When we study generosity in detail, of course, we see material giving, giving friendship, giving time, giving the gift of Dharma, how to do each of these, wrong gifts, timeliness, and so on and so on, about the details of giving. But when you look, you draw back and you look at it, what are you actually doing? You are getting rid of your desire and attachment, so that some natural help for others flows from your Buddha nature to others seamlessly, beautifully. So then, in order for that to be the case, in order for our generosity not to cultivate ego, because you just gave away $5 billion to people, and it's wonderful. One should never stop that, because feeding the poor, helping those who need help, somebody eats, somebody survives, somebody gets shelter, somebody gets help. That's wonderful. So when we talk about the paramita of generosity, we're talking about doing all of that, of course, because it's our human duty if we can, but not letting it go to our head, and on the contrary, knowing you are a dreamlike giver in a dreamlike world, doing what needs to be done in that particular dream. So then if ego is being reduced, then we are really starting on the paramita of generosity. But then once we are interacting with others and we are helping however we can, giving of ourselves. The word giving works very, very well. Giving of ourselves, giving up the selfishness and the territorial, and giving up the look at me, I'm so good, I'm a giver, I'm a doer, I'm a good boy, good girl, all of that. We are giving up, we are giving of ourselves, we're interacting with others. So then interaction with others is tricky. And that's where the second paramita needs to come in to help. It needs to be pure. Our ethics need to be good. When Milarepa sums up the second paramita, he said, other than having no hidden agenda, there is no right conduct. So when we study right conduct in detail, there are 50 pages on the module on right conduct in my study course, and that's brief. When we study it, we see it's about vows, it's about how you use body, speech, and mind not to hurt others, and how you can use body, speech, and mind to benefit others. We go into the details. But the heart of the matter is you are not acting hypocritically. So that as we help others, again, we are letting something from the purity of Buddha nature flow because they need help. We don't have some background agenda of you owe me, or I'm clocking up fantastic karma, I'm going to get really good rebirths. There is no other agenda than loving care for others. So we need the right conduct, because helping others is where Mara gets in. We've seen it again and again with NGOs, with people who become revolutionary leaders to free the people. They end up becoming the tyrants. The charity's money goes into people's pockets and very little goes to the people it's supposed to help. On a personal level, one helps somebody, but then you hear stories from people, those who seemed to help them in the first place. Now they're exploiting them. It gets very, very sticky and horrible. So if we're going to be generous and give up self, then we need purity. And then as we're helping others and doing the best we can to be pure, it's not easy. People, and I'm sure we've all discovered this, no matter how much you want to help them, and even if you can give the best and the right help, they don't respond ideally. They carry on hurting themselves. They're ungrateful. They even resent you, and so on and so on. It's very complicated. And then what we'd hope would happen doesn't happen. Our expectations aren't met. And then we get frustrated. We get angry. We feel like giving up, and so on. So forbearance generally means nothing will upset you. Even no matter how much you're given to others, you can't get fazed. Your mind is not going to become ugly, dark, angry, resentful. Your mind will remain at peace, because you understand, again, the wisdom comes in there. You understand what goes on. The power of karma is enormous, enormous. So anyway, normally forbearance is then our next friend on top of the purity. But when Milarepa sums up forbearance, he puts his finger on the very meaning. He said, other than being able to face voidness, there is no other forbearance. Because how is it in the end, even if we have huge and vast responsibilities like Karmapa or Taisittupa, how is it the mind can be strong? It's because there is an unshakable recognition of the interdependent power of karma, and we don't get involved. So voidness does not mean blank space voidness. It means that we understand the dreamlike nature and we are not in any way pulled into it. It is just the play of clear light in which we can allow something very pure to come through. And when we look at the 5 stages of the path in the future course, you will see how the word forbearance is a key phase before we leave the world of reincarnation. And then we need diligence. Now, diligence, we're going from more and more subtle to more and more subtle, harder to practice to harder to practice. So diligence does not mean hard work. It means joy. It means that however hard it is, whatever difficulties you're learning to cope with and to develop your Dharma muscles, and however hard it is to be pure, you are joyful about what you're doing because you've understood the value of Dharma. Now, you can't have that until not only you know Dharma intellectually, but you have a big backlog of experience of Dharma where you realize that no matter how hard it is and frustrating it could be, it is the one pure thing we can offer to the world. Our joy of Dharma and our lucidity about how hard the Buddhist path can be and how hard it can be to help others, that lucidity is at the heart of diligence. And it's why the word diligence is very good, because it's the same root as delight. It is, sorry for this, but delightigence is the real meaning. We delight in Dharma. And if if it's hard to sit or be in retreat, we delight in that difficulty because we know where it's taking us. And then we need meditation. So time's already kind of running out very, very quickly. It's just to show how the first 5 paramita, goodness, compassion, skillful means, can all be seen as the development of generosity in practice. Now, for all of them, what will make them or not take you to enlightenment is the presence of wisdom. And I already mentioned that a few minutes ago. This knowing the dreamlike, illusory-like, echo-like, changing cloud-like nature of all reality, and not getting drawn into it with a personal agenda, and not getting drawn into it with historical projections of reality on other people and on life itself. A huge open-mindedness whereby we let go the old prisons of our mentality, and in the open-mindedness we let in the Buddha's teaching, either as formal teachings or as the blessing that's coming through our practice and through our guru's presence. That wisdom of the ever-changing karma that is life going on, dreamlike nature, is what will make our generosity take us to the far shore. And without it, it never will. It will take us to wonderful rebirths where we get lots of resources. Right conduct will take us to rebirths where we have very healthy, beautiful bodies and existences, and deva realms and so on. All of the first 5, without the wisdom of voidness, prajnaparamita, keep us within the cycle of reincarnation. So whether it's virtuous karma or unvirtuous karma, it's called tainted karma because it's not taking us to Buddhahood. We haven't understood. It's not about a me achieving something, and so on and so on. So the wisdom of no self, the wisdom of no entity in any phenomena and so on, is needed to make any of the first 5, when we do them, into paramita. Otherwise, it's just generosity. It's not paramita of generosity. It's just pure conduct. It's not paramita of pure conduct. And as I said earlier, it's only when we've actually developed this is called accumulation, of goodness, whereby you have a wealth, and we feel it in good people. We feel their goodness. They're like a walking treasury of goodness, of kindness, of simplicity, all those qualities. They are the beings in whom wisdom can emerge. They are wise about life and about themselves, which is the main thing. And no amount of study, no amount of only one of those first 5 paramita, meditation, sitting meditation, shamatha, by itself cannot produce wisdom. So that's why we have the pyramids. They nurture each other. So now just a final word. That was about, very, very briefly, the structures in the Mahayana path. The 6 paramita that are the way to enlightenment. Now in Vajrayana, because everything is embodied in practice, visualization, mantra recitation, energy work, and so on, then we have a very special way, and it is very special. It's sort of the exception that overrides the rule of developing the 6 paramita through our own practice. I can only really talk to you about the way that's phrased in our Kagyu tradition, because I know a bit about that. I can't talk in the Dzogchen tradition or the Sakya or the Gelugpa tradition. And in our own Kagyu tradition, one of the main elements is faith and devotion. And we need to understand in there, through the proper teachings, which in the past would have been intimate teachings you receive from your own guru, like those who've been going to Mahamudra in India are receiving from their guru Taisitupa, for instance, or from Mingyur Rinpoche. Then there we are given a path of practice which is capable of taking us so swiftly to the mind's freedom, but in which those first 5 paramita, the skillful means, are embodied in the way we hold our mind in visualization. Now, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? If we go back to the Bodhisattva path, these first 5 paramita, where we engage in generosity and kind help to other beings, is about dealing progressively with our history of strong ego and reducing it so that more and more the Bodhisattva mind can take its place. It's a slow, it's called a gradual or a progressive path. What we're letting in is timeless. It's our Buddha nature. It never changes. It's always been perfect. It has everything in it. There's nothing more generous. There's nothing more pure in expression, nothing more unupset than that, nothing more meditative than that. So on a gradual path, people say, I'm working on my ego. Well, it's being worked on and it's being diminished. And the Buddha mind, bit by bit, is starting to be allowed to shine through. So with the deity practice, the Buddha mind, to which you are connected through your guru, because all Vajrayana is based on guru-disciple connection. That purity, that goodness, is being identified with every moment of the practice, undistractedly, if we can do it well. Which means that rather than working on your historical mind, it just dies of starvation. Sorry, I can't feed you, ego. Sorry, I'm out to Buddha. It's like out to lunch. The ego mind with all of its thoughts, all of its reactivity, all of its burning, simmering desires and unfulfilled wishes and stories it plays in its head, the tale it tells of you, the tale it tells of others, doesn't get a chance. You are one-pointedly in, like with Chinrezig. You're in Chinrezig's four arms. Loving kindness and compassion and the four limitless contemplations. You're in Chinrezig's kind gaze. You're in the 5 dhyana Buddhas around Chinrezig's head and their meaning. You are completely plumbed into purity. And because of your connection with the Guru, you actually sense that, and you've opened up a lifeline, an umbilical cord to it, whereby simply through devotion and one-pointed concentration within the meaning of the deity, clarity, purity, and confidence. Clarity, you see it well. Purity, you know what each part embodies. And confidence, you know that's the truth of you and the truth of existence. So all of that tralala, which can be incredibly complicated, and all of those lovely mudras and all that kind of stuff, and then how do you play the symbols and all the details of it, and then how you actually visualize all the offering goddesses making offerings and everything. All of that is antidote. Every part has meaning. Every part purifies your being reborn, dying in future lives, the activities of our life, the activities of our mind. So that is skillful means, skillful method, and also work with chakras and energy channels, energies. Skillful means can be very detailed, be quite energetic. But all the time we are doing those skillful means, we shouldn't get caught up in them, which is quite possible. I've seen retreaters, it's almost like, how can you say? There's a domesticity, I don't know if that's English, but all day long you're looking after the shrine, you're making offerings, you're making most beautiful tormas, and then you're teaching each other how you blow the instruments. And then when you sit down to practice, I'm visualizing this detail, I'm visualizing that one. You can get completely lost in it, as though it's something solid that's going to make you enlightened. We need to know the dreamlike nature of Dharma, as well as of samsara, the necessity of it, the amazing karma you're producing by being that accurate, munitious, is that a word? Anyway, into the details of all of that, but at the same time, a total distance avoidance. There I am, Ken Holmes, down there somewhere on earth, in retreat, doing all the tralala, all the mumbo jumbo, in the much larger picture of what's going on. Timeless Buddha nature, time-bound, reincarnate existences. So we need always prajnaparamita while we're practicing the skillful means. But then if we go too far the other way and we're just aware of the void, dreamlike nature of things, and we don't get down to the nitty-gritty of dealing with our karma through these skillful means of either the bodhisattva path or vajrayana practice, if we don't do that, we won't get enlightened. So the long and the short of it, because I must stop now, is summed up in the document you have in the Prajnaparamita teachings, one of the most important parts. It says, wisdom's like the eyes that show you where you're going and where to go. And skillful means, or compassion, or goodness, is like the feet that walk the path. It says, if there is no eyes of wisdom, then even though you can be doing so much Dharma, practicing so many good deeds, making so many offerings, being so generous, taking vows, practicing right conduct, it says it could be like if you have 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 blind people, they won't know how to go to the city of enlightenment. They'll be wandering around. It just takes one sighted person, and then 1,000 or 1,000,000 blind people can be led. So all of our goodness that we cultivate moment after moment, by our thoughts, by our speech, by our body, can just keep us in worldly existence unless we have the eyes of prajna. So prajna is needed, but prajna without wisdom, without the skillful means, it's like seeing where you need to go, but then you have no legs. You can see the far distant mountain. You can't even move 1 meter closer to it. We need the goodness, we need the love, the awareness, the love, the compassion, the bodhisattva's aspiration, and the bodhisattva's practice. The eyes and the feet, and then they need to work, obviously, in coordination. We need to see where we're going, the end of the journey, but you also need to see the ground just in front of you so you don't trip over a pothole. Also, some wild animals don't come and eat you, and so on and so on. So that's a very brief summary. I hope it's helpful. Please do look at the backup literature. And we've got about 10 minutes now if you'd like to make any comments. And you can turn on your